I've always wanted to have a body that looked like I lifted weights, but for years I struggled to get there. So I decided to bulk for 9 months and go all in on eating and training to build as much muscle as I possibly could. Did I get jacked or did I just get fat? How much did I actually eat? And what kind of workouts ended up being most productive for muscle growth? And of course, stay tuned for the results at the end. To start, we need to answer one critically important question, which is, why have I never been able to build the muscle I wanted in the first place? Starting this bulk at the beginning of March 2023, I was very lean, but I also felt super small.
I have a good amount of muscle, I'm lean, I have visible abs, and I could easily maintain this physique. But my friends, I'm not happy yet. I want to add more muscle to my frame.
The bigger problem was that every time I tried to bulk and gain muscle previously, it never really worked for me. Flashback to 2022 when I decided to bulk and I gained 20 pounds in 4 months. I got way too fat, way too quickly, and I just end up basically back where I started. It was like for every pound of muscle I was gaining 10 pounds of fat. Kind of like pouring yourself a whole bowl of cereal, but only giving yourself a splash of milk. It was tragic. Honestly, I thought maybe I just had bad genetics for building muscle and I was just forever destined to be skinny fat or something in between. Even after squatting 500 pounds, benching 300 pounds, and deadlifting in the mid 500s, I just never saw the physique results that I wanted. But this time I decided to do things differently, to see what I could actually accomplish if I set my mind to doing the best job I possibly could. Instead of eating a calorie surplus of over 500 calories per day where I was gaining 1 pound per week, this time I aimed to gain weight at a rate of around 1% of my body weight each month. So that was something like 1.5 pounds per month at the beginning. Starting at around 2,700 calories per day, I was feeling pretty full after each of my meals, but it was actually a welcome change after all that fat loss dieting I'd just finished. I kept my protein intake high and I was getting most of my calories from whole, minimally processed foods like fruits, veggies, starches, dairy, meats, and whole grains. First, my weight wouldn't budge, even though it felt like I was eating all the food. But after increasing my calorie target a few more times, I noticed that the scale started responding. That's the beauty of using an app like Macro Factor that adjusts your daily calorie targets based on how your body weight is responding. You can get a 2-week free trial of Macro Factor using my last name code Marra, M-A-R-R-A, to see what I mean. My girlfriend and I both buy the annual subscription, which works out to about $6 a month, and it is so worth it. By the end of the first month, I was up a little over 1.5 pounds, and I was feeling great about my progress. This definitely felt a lot better than before when I would just get bloated and sluggish, eating all kinds of junk food, and I was gaining 4 or 5 pounds per month. But this is where I hit my first roadblock. When I got into a bit of a busy period with work, I started working with more clients, I started making more YouTube videos, and I was just kind of stressed with life. Since my schedule was getting jammed, I'd have to hit the gym in the evenings, which I hate. It was just me and the squad of broccoli head, pajama pant teenage boys. But I didn't want to waste the bulk because I knew if I was skipping workouts, then all the weight I was gaining would just be purely body fat. At this point, I was cranking up my training volume so high that I was trashed after every session, and I was just drained at the end of every week. I was doing something like 16 sets per week for my biceps, and I was sore all the time. Lifting weights for 90 minutes per day and working 10 to 12 hours per day was starting to take a real physical and mental toll on me. And I was worried that all that stress was starting to negatively impact my progress. At this point, I reached out to Jeff Schofield to reclaim a little bit of my mental bandwidth that I was spending worrying about my training and my goals. Now you might be thinking a personal trainer with 8 years of experience shouldn't need another personal trainer, right? But I see the value in what I do, and I knew it would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about a style of training that I just never really gotten consistent results with. And if you've never hired a trainer before and you've only ever done this on your own, it is like the difference between buying white Wonder Bread at Walmart and then buying like a homemade sourdough artisan loaf from a bakery. They're both fundamentally the same thing, but once you try the sourdough, you wonder if you ever really had bread in the first place, and you never want to go back. So Jeff wrote me up a training plan that had dramatically fewer sets than I was used to doing, but he encouraged me to start pushing my sets harder and closer to failure. I was initially very skeptical about the program, and I was worrying about whether or not it would be enough volume for me to grow. After a couple months of sending my training footage to Jeff and getting his feedback, I was starting to push myself harder than ever before in my training. I was taking all my sets close to failure, a lot of sets all the way to failure, and some sets even beyond failure. And in case you're wondering what a true demonstration of failure looks like, then here it is. My workouts were a lot shorter now, and I was just doing 2 working sets per exercise, which surprisingly felt like plenty of work now that I was pushing myself much harder. And this is something I've seen recently with my one-on-one coaching clients too, like Tobias, who's constantly traveling for work and only has 30 to 45 minutes 3 days a week to train, but has been having very productive sessions because he's learned to push himself harder. Now this next check-in is when I really knew things were working.
I feel like I look jacked.
My arms were bigger, my shoulders were growing.
Wow.
Quad veins were popping out when I'd get a pump. It literally felt like almost every every pound I was gaining was coming purely from muscle. And that was an exciting moment for a guy who just kind of struggled to put on muscle my whole life. This was a point where I was in a groove with my training, my eating, and my sleep. It honestly felt like I was a beginner all over again in the gym. Workouts were short, they were fun, they were intense, and they were productive, which is a huge factor of overall enjoyment for me. I was thrilled to be seeing progress and gains. For someone who thought they had crappy muscle building genetics their whole life, at 27 and natural, this was a huge eye-opener for me. I knew that if I could just stick with what I was doing for another few years, I'd have a crazy amount of muscle. But after a few months of being in that solid groove, I started noticing that I was feeling pretty beat up by my training. I was getting more and more sluggish after my meals, and I would wake up every morning feeling like I just ate a Thanksgiving dinner.
You okay?
Yes. I'm just full.
I was bloated and lethargic a lot of the time, and since my weight had stopped climbing, I was forced to increase my calories.
166.2. Oh God, I feel fucking pregnant. Except if instead of a baby, it was like Godzilla and King Kong were fighting inside me.
And since I was having a harder time getting the food in me, I swapped out some of my lower calorie density foods like carrots and apples and chicken breast for higher calorie density things like rice and beef and pasta. Instead of throwing back mountains of fruits and vegetables every day like I was used to doing, I started only just having a modest portion just to make sure I got enough micronutrients each day. I started drinking more milk, I started eating more cereal and having more whey protein to help me hit my protein goals because sometimes eating more meat just made me feel sick. So this is when I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu again. 2 to 3 nights a week, I would go to the Jiu-Jitsu gym and do grappling. And at least 1 or 2 of those sessions per week would be an absolutely savage conditioning session. That turned out to be exactly what the doctor ordered for me though. Not only was it a nice mental break from just hammering weight training and working all the time, but it was also helping me sleep better and just feel more energized overall. I noticed my appetite started coming back and my work capacity in the gym went through the roof. And that led me to competing in my first ever jiu-jitsu tournament and falling back in love with the sport again. So I continued doing grappling 1 to 3 nights a week for the remainder of the bulk. And for anyone out there lacking a social circle or a way to push yourself competitively, I highly recommend you drop into your local gym for a free class. Staying more active each day got me back into that groove where things were clicking along and I just put my head down and focused for the next few months. The weather was getting warmer, which meant I was walking around more outside too, but all that food was just leaving me feeling hot and sweaty. After a big meal, I'd unbutton my pants and just be sweating sitting in the living room, but I knew that the food is what had to happen in order to keep the gains coming. Completely first world problem, but yeah.
It is September 15th, which means it's been fully 6 months and 1 week. I'm up just about 16 pounds. Started at 155, weighing in at 170, 172 most days now. This was 36.5 centimeters in March.
36.5 centimeters.
Oh yeah, 38.5. Boom, look at that. Almost 39. They're not big by any means, but they're fucking growing, and I'll take that shit. Definitely put some fat.
Still got abs though.
Yeah, like, I'm still there. I honestly forget what this was.
81 centimeters.
85.5.
At about 6 months in, this is where I had initially planned to end my bulk after gaining around 10% of my body weight. I still had visible abs, but I noticed the fat was starting to accumulate around my midsection, especially right around my waist and my love handles. I could have easily ended the bulk right here because I'd gained the weight I wanted to gain and I put on a solid amount of muscle.
I knew it wouldn't be night and day at the 6 month mark. Like, wow, I've put on so much muscle, but it's a step in the right direction. And that's all muscle gain progress really is. Just a bunch of steps in the right direction. So I'm gonna keep cooking, I'm gonna keep eating, and I'm gonna keep gaining weight.
And honestly, I knew this would be a challenging part of the process for me to deal with mentally. Up until this point, each month of bulking was leaving me looking and feeling more jacked every month. I swear I could just see new gains popping up all the time. But as I pushed further along, I noticed that the fat gain was making it harder for me to see the muscle growth that was happening underneath. There was a point of discomfort for everyone who bulks, both mentally and physically. Some people are okay with gaining a little bit of fat, where others struggle with the idea of gaining any fat at all. Some folks have no problem putting food down, while others struggle to eat enough no matter what. I knew I was heading into my discomfort zone, and this is where the bulk would challenge me in a way it had never challenged me before. I started feeling a little less excited to eat my meals each day and to see the scale creeping up because I knew I was heading north of that 15% body fat range. Honestly, at times I'd feel a little bit insecure about what I saw in the mirror, especially first thing in the morning or after a big meal when I was really bloated. I even saw a few comments on the YouTube channel from people saying that I had an average dad bod or that it looked like I'd never lifted weights before. Delusional comments like this are just another great reason to subscribe to the channel, by the way. I noticed all my shirts were fitting a lot tighter in the chest, the shoulders, the arms, and the lats. And my loving girlfriend was telling me every day how much more jacked I looked, and that was a huge support for me. She thinks I look like the statue of David, which is the best ever compliment for my physique. You mean my physique, right? But I also noticed that my shirts were hugging right around the belly section, and I was worried that all the fat I was gaining was going straight to my midsection. I actually considered doing a short fat loss diet or a mini cut at this point because I was scared to push my body fat any higher.
We're just gonna gain weight and gain muscle until I basically can no longer see my abs.
Stopping here would end all the great momentum I had with my training and my eating, and I didn't want to switch things up when they were clearly working. I dedicated myself to building a solid amount of muscle this year, and I knew that I could lose a ton of fat as soon as I decided to go on a fat loss diet again. Losing something like 1.5 pounds of fat every week would be no problem for me, because losing fat is a skill just like anything else, and when you're good at it, it happens really quickly. So I could honestly get back to a seriously lean level where I had veins running across my abs again in as little as 6 weeks.
I actually wrote a whole chapter on this in my free ebook Recomp 101 that will show you how to build muscle while losing fat at the same time. You can read it for free by using the link in the description box.
At this point, I started taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate every day, and I noticed my weight bumped up by about 5 pounds in the first 2 weeks. I was initially worried that I was getting bloated or I was somehow overeating, but then I reviewed the research on creatine and reminded myself that it stores water inside your muscle cells. So if anything, I was looking more jacked and just fuller overall. This was the most jacked I have ever been, and I was seeing all kinds of crazy veins in my arms, especially when I was getting pumps in the gym, and my shoulders just looked like they had never looked before. I'm sure my girlfriend was sick of seeing me flex every time we passed any reflective surface.
Ugh, I'm kind of excited, but also kind of nervous to see what I've done. I hope I didn't waste my time here. 81 centimeters. 34 inches at the waist. Bicep time. 36.5 centimeters. Can you see that? 40 centimeters. They've been struggling to grow for a long time. So seeing 40 centimeters feels pretty good.
So at this point, I'm basically up 20 pounds, of which I'm sure a few are just bloat and water, but all that bloat and water is making me look fuller and bigger. I have definitely gained some fat around the midsection especially. Obviously, I don't love that, but I'm also not too worried about it. When I had veins running across my abs at the start of the bulk, I was just way weaker and I didn't feel as good as I do now. And the gains I'm seeing have definitely been worth the fat I put on. I've put over an inch onto my arms and my quads are bigger now than they ever were when I was competing in powerlifting. My shoulders are looking really cool, and my back, which was historically a very stubborn area for me to put on size, has improved significantly, both in width and in thickness. And you all know it's all about the girth. For real though, I especially notice a difference in the way my clothes are fitting and feeling. If you go back and look at some older videos on my channel, even from a year ago, you're gonna see a crazy difference. How much of the weight that I gained do you think was bloat, muscle, and fat? Just leave a comment below letting me know. There are a few things I learned from this process that can help just about any guy on the planet level up their physique, and without having to force feed yourself. A huge part of why this bulk was so successful was because of my training. As I mentioned, I was pushing my sets really close to failure, or even beyond failure in some cases. And I was aiming to beat my logbook week after week, adding some reps or some load or a combination of the two whenever I could. I took my dumbbell incline bench press from 55 pounds for 10 reps to 75 pounds for 10 reps. Deep and paused and controlled. At the start of the bulk, I was leg pressing 225 pounds for 11 reps, and I just did 325 for a set of 12, with even better technique that just smashes my quads like crazy. Or my personal favorite, grinding 9 months of dumbbell incline curls to go from 25 pounds for 9 reps to 30 pounds for 10 reps. It sounds stupid, but that's what got my arms over 40 centimeters for the first time in my life. You gotta be patient with this stuff. It doesn't happen overnight. I could have easily looked back at my previous bulks and given up on building muscle, blaming it on bad genetics or whatever else. But no matter how hard I work on this fitness thing, whether my goal is to lose fat, build strength, or build muscle, I have always needed to work on it longer than I had wanted to. That meant committing to the process and continuing to work through it even when I wasn't seeing the results I wanted. Troubleshooting when things were working and coming back to do it better next time. Eating, sleeping, and training in a way that supports muscle growth is not a skill you are born with. And no matter how many YouTube videos you watch, you'll never get the results you want until you master the skills required. The only way to master those skills is through consistent practice. As you get better at them, the results just keep showing up faster and faster. From here, I plan to push hard for another few months of gaining and put a few more slabs of meat onto my frame. Then I'll do a short fat loss diet to clean up some of the fat I've gained along the way and reveal the size underneath. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see that video. If you want to put on a serious amount of muscle this year, then you need to be training properly for muscle growth. And there's one critical muscle building mistake I was making last year that I'm so glad I fixed. Otherwise, this video would have turned out very differently. So watch this video next to be sure you're not wasting your time when you're in the gym. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to thumbs up this video to let the algorithm know that other people should see it, and subscribe to the channel so I can see you in the next one. Peace.